Twist with Vicky, Episode 3. Moving from politics to a topic more to do with our routine lives, and one on which every single individual has certainly got an opinion. Tipping, or gratuity, shows generosity and a heart that's kind, or is it just corruption and reflects an elitist mind? That is the moot question. Now, the idea is not to ruffle any feathers, but only to rationally put forth a viewpoint which you may or may not agree with. However, this is one debate I feel very strongly about, as I believe that the tipping culture, which has now become a norm, is an extremely contentious and totally avoidable social practice. No better example than this to showcase how normalizing something that is inherently flawed can become a major issue, which sections of a society start promoting as the righteous thing to do. So much so that those who disagree with the concept are looked down upon as the ones who lack a conscience. They are even termed insensitive, uncaring, and at times callous, not to mention miserly. But is it actually true? The way I see things, most definitely not. In fact, it is as clear as day to anyone who's willing to see that the ones who indulge in this act of, for lack of a better word, charity, are the ones who are helping bring in a culture of entitlement and freebies. Yes, the other side will argue that it cannot be termed either a charity or freebie, as they are actually working for it. To that, my only answer is please listen to yourself, and this time a little carefully. They are getting paid for the work they do. It may or may not be an adequate payment, but that is the subject matter of a different debate. Tips, however, are over and above the salary or remuneration they draw. The owners of the hospitality businesses, our employers of these underpaid and unappreciated workforce, have quite conveniently pushed their own responsibility and liability onto the hapless guests. A custom, tradition, or act of generosity which started off as a choice and a voluntary gesture has now, thanks to the overzealous activists and crusaders, become a burden. In fact, extortion. It's a racket. There is literally no other way to put it. The malaise has spread to the other fields as well. No surprises there. Who doesn't want doles and free stuff? Taxi drivers, delivery persons, porters, valets, bellboys, and the way things are going, not long before you and I will be handing out tips to every person in the service industry. What really gets to me is the shamelessness with which they expect and in some cases even demand the gratuity, as if it is their fundamental right. And that is precisely where it all went wrong. What was a token of kindness or an expression of appreciation for a job well done has now become an entitlement. There are innumerable things about tipping that are against the basic principles of logic, reason, and even ethics. Have you ever considered the kind of judgment you're subjecting the others to when you drop those humongous tips? There may be those who genuinely cannot afford to tip big or even tip at all. Someone who has saved over months to celebrate a special occasion at a fancy joint being faced with the additional burden of having to shell out an extra 10 to 20% just because you've created a culture and expectation which is bizarre. That 20% may be the reason he's forced to pick an alternate venue. A family holiday for an ordinary individual, a first-time flight, spending days to get the best deals, the best rates, compromising on time, duration, venue, and then being peer-pressured into leaving healthy tips for the taxi driver who drives the family to the airport, the porter who helps lift the bags, the bellhop at the hotel, the servers at the restaurants, and God only knows who else. Thankfully, the absurdity hasn't yet spread to the in-flight services. Else, the argument would be that if you can afford a 15-20K flight, you can easily appreciate the services of the in-flight attendants by leaving them a couple of $1,000. The international business class travelers would probably be expected to leave a couple of domestic flight tickets by way of tips. As it is, the train servers are now expecting and actually receiving tips as well, even in the up-end trains like the Vande Bharats and the Shatabdis. And then there is the other aspect, that of the big hotels and restaurants, the Marriotts, the Hyatts, the Intercontinentals, and the Tajes. All said and done, their employees are paid reasonable salaries. They drive cars, live in decent accommodations. So why are we tasked with the job of enhancing their lifestyles? Ever considered that there is a whole class of individuals who both deserve and need our support, way more than the service providers in these high-end luxurious boutique hotels, restaurants, and lounges? Was it not about the students who could not afford to pay the tuition fees being aided by these tips to get through their college? When did it become about contributing towards the expenses of those who happen to be earning less than us? At many of these high-end joints, there is a prefix charge added as gratuity, which one has to pay irrespective. What makes matters intriguing is that there is an option of further increasing that 20-25% if in case you are so inclined, and people are actually doing so, marking it up by an additional 5 to 10%. Yes, I am referring to the US, but then as we know, it doesn't take too long for these socially likable practices to find their way into India. And I'm sure those who frequent the West are well aware that even at many self-service counters now, there is a provision for leaving tips. What for? Your guess is as good as mine. Given that no one is actually demanding tips at these counters yet. But then isn't this how it all started in the first place? I'm at a complete loss to understand why is it so difficult for people to see that they are basically corrupting our entire society. How is this different from a public servant or someone at the banking counter or even at a post office demanding or expecting money for merely doing his job? They too may be in a lower income strata than many who are availing the services, and just like the others who are receiving tips as they deserve it, right? These people are also underpaid and underappreciated in all likelihood. Fact is that when you hand out money for work or a service which the person is already getting paid for, it falls within the definition of bribery or inducement, or in the least, an unjustified incentive. One may argue that this is not the same as one tends to leave a tip after the service and not before. But then don't people who frequent a particular haunt tend to get better services, better seats if they are good tippers? Aren't the streets outside the houses of the residents who are known to give regular handouts much cleaner as compared to those who are not so charitable? In public parking spaces manned by attendants, certain cars somehow always manage to find slots even though the parking full sign may be up. I wonder how that works. Honestly speaking, I would have no issues with people leaving hefty tips, but the moment that leads to ostracization of those who don't, and them being treated as lesser beings, they are getting compromised service, it becomes a problem. As long as tipping remains a voluntary act of generosity, one would have no difficulty. But when it is enforced and becomes mandated as a ritual, custom, or practice, it's a big, big no. We wax eloquent about how things should be and are quick to lament, call out, and bemoan our societal habits. We complain about unethical behavior, the lack of integrity and values. But at the same time, we indulge in and promote activities which further those exact traits and push people onto that very path which leads them away from all those valued qualities, principles, and basic morality. Even from the aspect of the students, what exactly are we teaching them at the very start of their careers? Are we not getting them used to benefits and perks which are not quite commensurate to the work they do? Will it not lead to certain expectations and maybe even a degree of dissatisfaction once they realize that it is only the pay package they can actually depend upon, and they won't get anything additional for just doing their job? Similarly for the taxi drivers, hotel attendants, valets, porters, etc. They are so accustomed and used to being handed out free money that they are reluctant to give their best services to the guests or customers who do not tip them or tip as well as some of their more affluent clientele. So you are actually encouraging deficiency in service. Say what you will, defend it all you want, but the bottom line remains. Tipping is a form of bribery and a practice which is doing more harm than good. We'll grant you this much though. Your intent might be honorable and your heart possibly in the right place. But the way I see things, this is one of those matters where the mind should be allowed to prevail over the heart. Write in with your views on twistwithvicky@gmail.com.